Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on relationships, like really deep,
Always a good topic.
for
Yeah.
sure. And we've got a great source to unpack this podcast episode. It's called Understanding the True Meaning of Relationships. Dating, commitment, family, the whole shebang.
Oh, I saw that one from
Yeah,
Inner Balance Red Print.
right.
Mm.
That's the one. And what caught my eye was they don't just stop at like modern dating advice. They go way back.
Oh, yeah. They had that whole bit about the history of the word date itself.
Right. Like, can you imagine in the 1800s, a date meant you were practically on the road to marriage?
Huge difference from swiping right, that's for sure.
Totally. But that kind of contrast is what we're here for.
Right.
Figuring out how we got from there to here when it comes to relationships.
And maybe, like the source asks, figuring out where we want to go from here. Like, what do we want relationships to mean in our own lives?
Big questions. So let's dive in. They start by comparing, get this, passing notes in high school
Oh, I remember that.
to dating apps, which on the surface seems kind of silly, but
But it makes you think, right? Is it that different? Are we still just trying to get someone's attention just in a more digital way?
and the source really pushes on that. Are we looking for validation or genuine connection?
Yeah, I highlighted that part. It's so easy to get those two mixed up, especially these days.
Right. Like, have we ever confused those two?
Oh, for sure. But the source says dating should be about self-discovery, not just finding someone to complete you.
Yeah, they had that great line. Something about sharing your fullness, not trying to fill a void.
Makes you think about those times you felt pressured to be in a relationship just because you didn't want to be alone.
Ugh, been there. But that kind of pressure, it can lead to some bad choices, right?
For sure. And that takes us right into the next big thing, commitment.
Which they totally blew my mind here. They're saying commitment isn't just about, like, exclusivity. It's an emotional investment you make every single day.
I liked that part. It's not just a label, it's how you act, how you show up for someone.
And it made me think, have I ever been afraid of commitment? Not because of the commitment itself, but because I was scared of picking the wrong person.
Oh, 100%. The source even talks about that, like, maybe we're so worried about messing up that we don't commit to
That'd be
anything.
just as bad, right?
Oh, yeah. And they even debunk some of those common commitment myths, like how it kills excitement.
I was going to say, they were all about how true commitment actually makes things more exciting.
Because you've got that foundation of trust, so you can actually be more vulnerable, take more risks together.
Right. It's not about limiting your freedom, but choosing to share it with someone.
I liked how they put that. But then they get into family, and things get even more interesting.
Oh, yeah, this is where it gets really real. They start talking about family by choice, which honestly hit close to home for me.
For me, too. Like,
Yeah.
acknowledging that sometimes your closest bonds aren't with blood relatives.
Exactly. And they ask this question. It's so simple but powerful. Do you see your family as a source of strength or stress?
Oof.
Yeah.
That one makes you think.
Right. Like, are my family relationships adding to my life or taking away from it?
And they go on to talk about communication, boundaries, forgiveness, all that good stuff.
Which are, like, essential, whether it's your
Yeah.
family you were born into or the one you choose.
Totally. And it makes me think, have I ever had to reevaluate a family relationship, set some boundaries to protect myself?
Oh, for sure. And the source really empowers you to do that, to create the kind of family dynamic that actually supports you.
Which ties back to that whole idea of choice, right? We have more agency than we think, even when it comes to family.
So, lots to unpack there. What stood out to you most so far?
Tough one. I think that historical perspective on dating really got me thinking, like, how much have our expectations actually changed? And is that for better or worse?
Good question. And one we'll have to keep exploring as we go deeper into this episode. But for now, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to dig into those other juicy bits about commitment and family.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready for more. You know, going back to the whole dating for validation thing, it's like we've all been there, right? Scrolling through Instagram, feeling kind of bad about ourselves.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's so easy to get sucked into that comparison game.
And the source makes a good point. Like, if you're constantly looking for external validation, are you ever really going to feel good enough on your own?
Right, and how can you build a healthy relationship if you're starting from a place of insecurity?
Exactly. And that ties back to what they were saying about dating being a form of self-discovery.
Oh, yeah, like you got to know yourself before you can truly connect with someone else.
Makes sense. Remember that time you were telling me about when you were so focused on getting matches on that dating app that you weren't even paying attention to who you were actually talking to?
Ugh, yeah, I was so caught up in the game that I forgot about the actual point.
It's like, what are we really looking for in these apps? A quick ego boost or something more meaningful.
Right. And that fear of missing out, that can be paralyzing too,
Yeah. Oh, totally. The source even talks about that, how that fear can keep us from committing to anything at all.
which can be just as bad as committing to the wrong thing, right?
For sure. But they also say, like, maybe we're so afraid of making the wrong choice that we don't even give ourselves the chance to choose.
Makes you wonder how many amazing relationships never even had a chance to start because of that fear.
And that's where those commitment myths come in, right? Like the idea that commitment equals boredom.
Oh, they totally debunk that.
Yeah.
Remember what they said about how genuine commitment actually allows you to be more spontaneous, more adventurous?
Because you've got that safety net of trust. You know the other person has your back no matter what.
It's like that saying, a ship in harbor is safe. But that's not what ships are built for.
I like that. It's about taking risks together, growing together.
But even with the best intentions, things can get messy, right? Especially when it comes to family.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. I loved how they talked about family by choice, acknowledging that those bonds can be just as strong, if not stronger, than blood ties.
So true. And it makes you think about those times when family relationships feel more like a burden than a blessing.
They even asked that tough question, like, do you see your family as a source of strength or stress?
That's a good one to reflect on. Are those relationships adding to my life or taking away from it?
Because sometimes you got to set boundaries, even with family.
Yeah, it's not always easy, but sometimes it's necessary for your own well-being.
The source talks about how healthy family dynamics involve communication, respect, forgiveness.
All those things that are important in any relationship, really.
Exactly. And I think that's a good reminder that no matter what kind of relationship we're talking about, it takes effort and intentionality to make it work.
It's not just about finding the right person. It's about showing up for each other, day after day.
Choosing to love and support each other, even when it's hard.
So, what are your thoughts on all this? What's resonating with you the most?
I think what's sticking with me is that emphasis on conscious choice. Like, we have more agency than we realize, even when it comes to relationships. We get to decide who we let into our lives and how we want those relationships to look.
That's a powerful reminder, and one that I think we all need to hear from time to time.
For sure. Because at the end of the day, relationships should be a source of joy and fulfillment, not a source of stress and obligation.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, let's take another quick break and come back for the final part of this deep dive. We still have a lot to unpack, including that big question the source leaves us with. What does a meaningful relationship mean to you?
Can't wait to dig into that. It's like we're the architects of our own relationships in a way.
I like that. Building something intentional, something that reflects our values.
Right. And the source ends with this really great question, kind of leaves you hanging.
Oh.
Lay it on me.
They ask, like, what does a meaningful relationship mean to you? Not just generally, but personally.
That's deep. Right. Like, what are we actually looking for? Is it shared passions, a sense of security, intellectual connection?
Or maybe it's all of those things. Maybe it's something totally different for each person.
And I think that's the point they're trying to make, that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
It's about being honest with yourself about what you need and want.
And then having the guts to actually go after it, even if it looks different from what everyone else is doing.
Because there's so much pressure these days, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have to be coupled up, you have to have kids, you have to follow this certain path.
And the source is basically saying, screw that. Build the relationships that light you up, regardless of what anyone else thinks.
I love that message. Like, permission to create your own happiness, your own version of success.
Exactly. And to celebrate all the different ways that people connect with each other.
Like, expanding the definition of what a good relationship can even look like.
Totally. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the biggest thing you're walking away with?
I think for me, it's that reminder to be intentional. Like, we have more control over our relationships than we might realize.
I agree. And that we shouldn't be afraid to walk away from relationships that aren't serving us, even if it's hard.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Because we deserve to be in relationships that bring us joy, not drain our energy.
And that we have the power to create those relationships if we're willing to put in the effort.
So to everyone listening, we hope this has given you some food for thought, maybe even inspired you to take a closer look at your own relationships.
And don't forget to ask yourself that big question. What does a meaningful relationship mean to me?
Because the answer might surprise you.
It might even lead you to some amazing new connections.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for more relationship wisdom.